Hello, my name is Wendy Stevens, and I'm going to be speaking a little bit about the role that serendipity and community and sharing play as you use the Teaching with Primary Sources network to identify resources to extend and expand your classroom pedagogy. I have the privilege of working with school teachers who are becoming school librarians as the school library program chair at Jacksonville State University. And I really wanted my students to think very deeply about the affordances of instructional technology, what it was like to live in a world before edutainment, and how those types of technologies really expanded the frontiers of the imagination, especially in the pre-digital era. So this was my original post within the Arts and Primary Sources content group on the Teaching with Primary Sources network. I found out about lantern slides, the fact that they went back all the way to the 17th century, 200 years before photography, and that they provide this combination of entertainment and education in a way that audiovisual and multimedia augmented virtual realities do today. So these were often at first hand painted, and then they became produced through photographic processes. There are some wonderful resources online about these. So I just sort of started with this because it was something that was new to me. And I think I had read references to lantern slides in the novels of Barbara Pym, but I wasn't 100% positive sort of what that was. So this was a real voyage of discovery for me. And it was so much earlier than I ever anticipated projection technology being used. And these are among the lantern slide collections in the Library of Congress that I identified when I first started looking at these. And Mary Johnson, one of our wonderful network leaders, was able to provide some images from a Jacob Riis exhibit that she had gone to at the Library of Congress. And it involved an actual magic lantern demonstration for students who are visiting the exhibit. So very exciting stuff. And Jacob Riis is one of the names that pops up um, as you study the history of lantern slides, and particularly media used for social justice types of purposes. This is the online version of the exhibit that Mary described seeing. Of course, so much is known about Jacob Riis as a reformer, but I found it very fascinating to find out that his documentary photography actually extended to capturing scenes from his native Denmark as well. Still Extant is a magic lantern show which produces traveling productions with a schedule, all sort of pre-pandemic at the point that we were talking about. But it shows that this type of interactive visual experience is still going strong and still has aficionados today. This is from the library. It's a primary source, and this deals with a handheld lantern slide, probably illuminated by a candle. But I thought it was really interesting to see the sheet that they have hung on the wall for the projection purposes. It reminds me so much of the pull down screens that so many classroom teachers used before whiteboards, very early before the Civil War. And because one of my favorite things to do is to look for the very earliest instances of these, Christiane Huygens, the who's best associated with optics, also did some work on this very early, as I said, 17th century. So this is some lantern slide illustrations that he are the first extant known ones. And you can see Ries's native Denmark here in lantern slides, which slightly predate the images and the work that he's known for. One of the more interesting and robust collections that I discovered at the Library of Congress was this Anna and Horatio Spafford talking about the American colony in Jerusalem, which was not something that I knew about, but it's very well documented. Again, probably to be shown in a community or congregational setting. And here is another closely related visual technology, the stereoscope, another attempt to create dimensionality from the two-dimensional, also of the Spafford home, which was actually a tourist destination. In the Library of Congress holdings, the earliest design for a lantern slide is linked to the abolition movement. So the earliest one, which is held there, actually deals with sort of an allegory about the evils of slavery. And as you can see, it is hand drawn. This is a little bit more of an artistic and an interpretive lantern slide. This is Andrew Johnson supping with the devil. So again, kind of an interesting use to think of where this might have been shared. So we looked at the earliest design for a lantern slide, but what is the earliest lantern slide that actually appears in the Library of Congress? And I believe it may be this image of a young Union soldier, this child in military uniform, which, according to the bibliographic record for this lantern slide, dates to sometime between 1860 and 1870. It's part of the Blackwell Papers, which have a number of non-visual aspects which are earlier than this. But it's always interesting to think about the lifespan and the longevity of these technologies when they became widespread and how long they persisted. When I looked for the most recent lantern slide, it was also very interesting because this ended up being from the late 40s. It's a slide which shares a Mardi Gras float. And think about this. This is, after motion pictures, newsreels, all sorts of photography. What were the affordances of having these as lantern slides in particular? So lots of things to think about in terms of the fact that one technology is not directly superseding another. The Library of Congress also holds trade publications around lantern slides, which are very fascinating to see the sort of range of things. This one's from 1899 that they listed, and the technical approach to the projection process. And here's one of the ads from the trade publication. It shares the cost for each of these models of lanterns. But what I thought was very interesting is it's promoting this images from the Spanish Civil War. So think about the fact that there were video cameras and things like that operating. What is the affordance of having it at a larger scale and in this format? And here is where you can see some of those roughly contemporary videos. There are also catalogs similar to the way that we have bibliographies and instructional materials. Those existed for visual education using these types of slides, visualized and vitalized. And as we were all talking about lantern slides, Mary Johnson shared that she had bought three hand painted fairy tale lantern slides at an antique toy store in Paris, and was able to find those and share those with us. And I think that they really made us think particularly about what this would do for children who might not have been previously able to visualize these types of texts. And we even got a peek at the toy store where Mary Johnson had stumbled upon those. And kind of spontaneously, lantern slides began popping up in the mainstream media around the same time. There was an Amazon movie about Louis Wayne. His hand painted lantern slides are still available today. Uh, Gorgeous works of art, and you can kind of see that process here. And the I think it's the third episode of The Gilded Age. They actually attend a lantern slide performance, which includes sort of a grooved indentation to move the lantern along to give the impression of a train sort of thundering towards the audience, along with a live accompaniment of music. So it's well worth watching to kind of envision what a public lantern slide demonstration would have looked like. And I actually found out that the Tony Pastore's Music House, which is featured in the Gilded Age, was an actual vaudeville house on the Lower East Side. So it was very interesting to find out about how meticulous they had been in staging that scene. And going back to the Library of Congress to look up more about Tony Pastore's theater, that was actually one of the earlier places where Bob Hope, someone who's very contemporary, especially for the older of us who remember very very vividly, had gotten his start. So again, showing that these types of technologies and the venues where they were shown are not maybe as far past as we might first guess. And again, I'm going to point you to the Library of Congress's collection of photochrom prints. And again, notice the travel aspect of these, showing exotic European destinations to people who may never have the wherewithal to make the trip. And Kate Cooney, who does such a wonderful job with the arts and primary sources group within the Teaching with Primary Sources Network, again came to talk about moving panoramas and other types of motion in from two dimensions. And we learned about from another mentor lithopanes and how the illumination of these created an effect of dimension. So it went from being something that was fairly sculptural and non-nuanced to when lit from behind, something that was very dimensional. And these are porcelain objects. So many interesting technologies to share, things from far and wide, with the very constrained and local audiences of the 19th century and early 20th century. So I had my original post, and then it sparked a look at some of the themed collections. We talked about the exhibit, the online exhibit that still exists, trade publications related to lantern slides, photochrons, moving panoramas, lithopanes, and then a technology connection, the possibility of creating your own lantern slides. We also looked at present day iterations of lantern slides in the media. So this was a very circular and iterative process, not nearly as linear as is depicted here. So perhaps the process of inquiry within the Teaching with Primary Sources Network is better represented by a spider web. It goes less directionally and more in an interwoven, glorious, and sometimes breathtakingly unimaginable pattern. And I hope that you have as much fun delving into the things which interest you and discovering connections from all of the very smart people in the network.
And last but not least, I wanted to show you this lantern slide, which I purchased, which is a common scene in Amsterdam. It's a canal view with some gorgeous canal homes and a boat with a mast diagonally. When I brought this to show at NCSS, I had ordered it via eBay and it came very carefully packaged. It was a little bit more cavalier, so this object, which had survived for so long, such a fragile thing, I subsequently broke in bringing it to share. But there are hundreds and thousands of more lantern slides out there for you to investigate and share with your students as you think about technology, instructional technologies, and how those have evolved over time.